September 2nd, right? Tuesday, September 2nd, 2014. Okay, let's begin with the homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, good morning, everybody. Okay, so now we return to the compendium of the process freed. Okay, so far we've done the last session we did yesterday. We took the wholesome karma of the sense sphere, the wholesome karma of the fine material sphere, and the wholesome karma of the immaterial sphere. And now we come to the next section in the compendium, and this deals with the results of karma. So it's going to be explaining the results of karma by way of the kind of chittas that these unwholesome and wholesome karmas produce. So we're now in section 27. This is on page 210 in the English edition. So this is dealing first with the results of unwholesome karma. So it says, herein, unwholesome karma excluding restlessness, that's excluding the one citta that's dominated by restlessness, produces rebirth linking in the woeful plane, or the plane of misery, that is in the four bad destinations. But during the course of existence, that's during the course of life, all 12 unwholesome types of consciousness give effect to or produce the 7 unwholesome resultants anywhere in the sensuous world or the fine material world, according to circumstances. Then for the explanation of this, we have the guide, which explains that the citta which is rooted in delusion and accompanied by restlessness is the weakest of all the unwholesome cittas. That's because restlessness prevents the citta from getting any degree of stability. And so the citta which is restless can't settle down on its object. And so of all of the unwholesome cittas, it's the weakest. And because it's the weakest, it's said that it's not capable of taking on the role of generating rebirth. I also wonder, this is my private reflection, how the citta on doubt can take on the role of generating rebirth. It seems a little bit strange to me. But it's not excluded, so maybe there is such a possibility. Okay, but any of the other 11 unwholesome chittas can generate the unwholesome resultant investigating consciousness. That's the unwholesome resultant investigating consciousness. It's accompanied by neutral feeling, which takes on the functions of rebirth linking. Then after the rebirth moment, it continues as the bhavanga through the rest of life up to the death moment. So it takes on those three functions for beings who have been reborn in any of the four woeful or miserable realms of existence. But all 12 unwholesome chittas can generate the 7 unwholesome resultant chittas anywhere in the sense sphere world during the course of existence. So what are the 7 unwholesome resultant chittas that it can produce? First, there's the unwholesome resultant 5 types of sense consciousness: eye, ear, nose, tongue, body consciousness. So when people in the sense sphere realm experience undesirable, disagreeable forms, sounds, smells, odors, tastes, and tactile sensations, that experience is said to be the result of unwholesome karma that's maturing. So what is actually the result of the karma is the resultant chittas. But in the jhavana phase, we have the capacity, the ability to respond to the undesirable objects in a way which is not determined by the nature of the objects. So if we have a well-developed mind, then we can respond to undesirable objects with equanimity. Or even we could turn the tables on them, so to speak. If, for example, somebody is speaking rough and harsh words to us, so instead of responding with anger, with displeasure, with resentment, we could turn the tables if we practice loving kindness to radiate loving kindness towards that person. And then we'll have even a joyful, wholesome citta accompanied by loving kindness. Okay, so what they produce are the 5 kinds of sense consciousness. Then there's the unwholesome resultant receiving consciousness and the unwholesome resultant investigating consciousness. In the fine material world, the unwholesome chittas will produce only 4 unwholesome resultants. That is because it's said that in the fine material realm, the beings do not have the senses of smelling, tasting, and bodily contact. And so they just have the senses of seeing and hearing. And so the unwholesome resultants will produce just unwholesome eye consciousness, unwholesome ear consciousness, then receiving and investigating consciousness. Okay, then the sense sphere wholesome karma comes next. So wholesome karma of the sense sphere produces rebirth linking in the sensuous, blissful, or fortunate plane. And then in the course of existence, it produces the 8 great resultants. And it also produces the 8 rootless resultants anywhere in the sensuous world or in the fine material world according to circumstances. When it says according to circumstances, this means again that in the fine material world it has to exclude the wholesome resultant nose consciousness, taste, tongue consciousness, and body consciousness. Okay, so coming to the guide, the explanation is given that the great resultants occur in 4 modes. They occur first with the 3 process-freed functions of rebirth linking, bhavanga, and death. And then within the cognitive process, they appear with the function of registration. Okay, so these resultants ripen only in the sensuous world because the registration occurs only in the sensuous world. And in the fine, of course, in the fine material realm, immaterial realm, the rebirth, linking, bhavanga, death consciousness, those functions are taken over by the fine material resultants and the immaterial resultants. So in the sense sphere world, rebirth, linking, bhavanga, and death will be usually taken by one of the 4 great resultants or the wholesome resultant investigating consciousness. Okay, now the 8 rootless resultants are the fivefold sense consciousness, the receiving consciousness, and the 2-fold investigating consciousness. One investigating consciousness is accompanied by neutral feeling. The other investigating consciousness is accompanied by joyful feeling. And the 2 investigating consciousnesses can also occur in the cognitive process in the role of registration, while the investigating consciousness, accompanied by neutral feeling or equanimity, can also function as the rebirth, bhavanga, and death consciousness in beings who have a somewhat defective birth, those who are congenitally blind, deaf, dumb, and so on. And then all 8 rootless resultants ripen in the sensuous world, but in the fine material world, the 3 types, nose, tongue, and body resultants do not arise. Okay, now the author is going to explain the relationship between the wholesome chittas and the roots that will be present in the wholesome resultants. This is a little bit scary, this section. Okay, so he says here, superior wholesome karma accompanied by 3 roots produces rebirth linking, similarly accompanied by 3 roots, and during the course of existence it gives effect, or it produces 16 kinds of resultants. And now to clarify the meaning of this, it's said in the Abhidhamma commentaries that wholesome karma can be distinguished into 2 grades. So we could say that the wholesome chittas can be distinguished into 2 grades, the superior and the inferior. And there are a number of factors that condition whether the citta is superior or inferior. I remember one of them is that before doing the wholesome deed, one is joyful at the prospect of doing it. While doing it, one maintains one's happiness while doing it. Then after doing it, one reflects that one has done that wholesome deed and rejoices over having done it. And so in this way, one strengthens the power of the wholesomeness in that citta. And I would think that the prompted cittas tend to the unprompted cittas would be of a superior grade than the prompted cittas, if you remember the distinction. If one does a wholesome action on one's own initiative, then it has more power, where if one has to be prodded and motivated by others, then the wholesome power is weaker. Okay, so wholesome karma of an superior grade accompanied by 3 roots will produce rebirth linking accompanied by 3 roots, and during the course of existence it produces the 16 kinds of resultants. The 16 kinds will be the 8 kinds of beautiful sense sphere resultant cittas and the 8 kinds of rootless resultant cittas. But now we have the wholesome karma of an inferior grade accompanied by 3 roots, and the wholesome karma of a superior grade accompanied by 2 roots produces rebirth linking with 2 roots and gives effect to 12 kinds of resultants during the course of existence, during the course of life. So what is excluded from the resultants are the beautiful resultants with 3 roots. And so our aspiration should be always to achieve a rebirth consciousness with 3 roots. Of course, it's when we have the 3 roots, the 3 beautiful roots, that we have the better opportunity for spiritual development. So that's why when we have to be sure to do a lot of wholesome deeds, and always it's good from time to time to pause, not to congratulate oneself and become conceited and proud, but to think that in the course of this day I've done a number of good wholesome deeds, and then rejoice in that. And then also if you think of other people who are doing or who have done good wholesome deeds, then you rejoice in their kinds of wholesome deeds, then that will strengthen the wholesome power of your own mind. Okay, so, and then it says, wholesome karma of an inferior grade accompanied by 2 roots produces rebirth linking without roots, and it will produce the rootless resultants during the course of existence. You know, so even though we want to be reborn back into the human world, but we don't want to have a rebirth consciousness without roots. But somehow I have to say I suspect a little bit that the Abhidhamma texts are a bit stern in their stipulations about the kinds of rebirth. But we should always make the effort to strengthen the wholesome, to make the wholesome as strong as possible, because that will always increase our chances of gaining the rebirth opportunity with 3 roots. But I think of people like, okay, so I think somebody yesterday mentioned the name Rupert Murdoch, or the Koch brothers, the heads of these corporations, they must be very intelligent. This is a little bit problematic. So we have to say that they have a kind of innate intelligence within their mind, but I can't consider this to be like the wholesome root of wisdom or non-delusion. In fact, they have very thick, very dense delusion. And if they had done a lot of wholesome karma to be reborn with a rebirth consciousness with 3 good roots, including the root of knowledge or non-delusion, then why do they have such bad dispositions in the present? I don't know. Things I can't explain. Okay, so the guide to 29 explains the difference between the superior grade and the inferior grade of the citta, of the karma. So the superior grade of a wholesome karma is done with a mind that has been well cleansed of defilements. It doesn't mean that one has to be an arahat having completely eliminated the defilements, but the mind has to be one which is sort of saturated with the joy of doing what is good and wholesome, with the peace and tranquility while doing what is wholesome. And then it's attended with good supporting causes before and after the deed. This is especially when doing some really significant deed. For example, when giving alms, one gives alms to the virtuous with wealth righteously obtained, then one rejoices before the act of giving and after the act of giving. So when one rejoices before, one is creating a more wholesome karma, then that wholesome state of mind feeds into the wholesome citta that arises while performing the deed, and then after the deed, again one rejoices, and that again generates more wholesome karma. So in this way, the wholesome karma becomes very pure and very powerful. Whereas the inferior grade is that done with a mind that before and after the performance of the wholesome deed has been tainted by such defiled states as self-exaltation, disparagement of others, and subsequent regret. So one thinks maybe that if I give a very generous gift, then other people, of course I'm going to make it known to others, so other people will admire me. Maybe I'll get my name on a plaque. Maybe I'll get the certificate as being outstanding citizen in my county. Or if one is giving something at the monastery, one thinks, maybe the chief monk will give, when he's giving the appreciation speech to the community, he'll say, Mr. De Silva was so generous today and made such a generous offering to the monastery. And so one wants to bolster oneself, and then one either verbally or mentally disparages others, and one thinks, these others don't give as generously as I do, or they don't observe the precepts as purely as I observe them, or they're not as diligent in meditation as I'm diligent, and so on. And then another defilement is subsequent regret. That is, after one does a good, wholesome deed, afterwards one has regret about it. Like there's a story told in the, I think it's in the Udana, that the Buddha was relating this about somebody back in the past, a man in the past life. He had been a very wealthy man. Yeah, now I remember. Yeah, he had been a very wealthy. in this life he was a very wealthy man, but he lived in a very, very miserly way. He would just, for himself, prepare just the simplest food, not out of contentment, but just he didn't want to spend money on the food. He would wear very plain, ordinary clothes. He didn't enjoy any of the things that his wealth was entitled him to. So the monks asked the Buddha why this was the case, and the Buddha said, in the previous life, he had been like a millionaire, and then a Pacceka Buddha, this is somebody who's enlightened but doesn't establish the teaching, came to his house on alms round, and he gave the Pacceka Buddha alms, generous alms, but afterwards he felt regret about that and said, I shouldn't have given the Pacceka Buddha such lavish alms. I should have just given him some of the leftover rice and and the spoils of the curries. And because of that, it created the unwholesome karma so that he couldn't enjoy his wealth during his life in the Buddha's time. Okay, I'm going to skip over the alternative view. If you want, you can read it on your own, but it makes things too complicated for us. Let's just keep it clear and simple. And the first view that the author mentions is what you might call the mainstream view in the Abhidhamma tradition. But there were some other teachers of Abhidhamma, I guess during the early period, the early flourishing of Buddhism in Sri Lanka, some of other teachers who had another interpretation. Okay, now we come to the results of the fine material sphere karma. Okay, and so we'll be reading from the text. As regards wholesome karma of the fine material sphere, this would be the wholesome karma of the fine material sphere is the actual development of the 4 or 5 jhanas, the meditative absorptions. So, as regards wholesome karma of the fine material sphere, those who develop the first jhana to a limited degree are reborn in the realm of Brahma's retinue. Those who develop the first jhana to a medium degree, they are reborn among Brahma's ministers, and those who develop it to a superior degree are reborn amongst the Mahabrahmas. And so if you remember when we did the cosmology of the fine material realm yesterday, the overview, we saw that each jhana is associated with 3 planes of rebirth. And which plane a person who achieves the jhana will take rebirth into is determined by the degree to which they master that jhana. So those who, possess it and have developed it to some extent, but don't yet have full mastery over it, will tend to be reborn in the lowest of these 3 realms. Those who gain a medium degree of mastery over a jhana will tend to be reborn in the middle tier corresponding to that jhana. And those who develop full mastery over the jhana will tend to be reborn in the superior tier or plane corresponding to that jhana. Okay, so that's the assignment of rebirths according to the first jhana. Then the same principle holds in regard to the second jhana, also 3 levels according to the degree of mastery, whether the gods of minor luster, gods of infinite or measureless luster, or the gods of radiant luster. Well, actually, this is developing the second and the third jhana to the 3 degrees. Then developing the fourth jhana to the 3 degrees, when we'll be reborn respectively among the gods of minor aura, the gods of infinite aura, or the gods of steady aura. Okay, now those who develop the 5th jhana in the Abhidhamma system, or the 4th jhana in the Sutta system, who develop it in the ordinary way, no matter what their degree of mastery, it seems, they are reborn amongst what are called the gods of great reward. So there might be, I would guess that there will be perhaps 3 levels within the gods of great reward, according to the degree of mastery over the 5th or the 4th jhana. So maybe that heaven has 3 levels according to the expertise. Don't we get this reflected in the Pure Land school also? With the degree according to which one has purified one's recitation of the Buddha's name. There are the 3 layers or levels of the lotuses into which one is reborn. Then each level of lotuses has 3 secondary levels, so that there are 9 levels of lotuses. So it seems that developed out of this Abhidharmic way of thinking, that in the fine material realm there are 3 levels for each of the jhanic planes. Okay, but then there are, as I mentioned yesterday, some people, some meditators who develop the 4th jhana, and they don't want to continue with consciousness or awareness. Their aspiration is to become completely without consciousness. So they think that in the cessation, complete cessation or ending of consciousness is the highest bliss. And so they develop this passion towards perception. This is based upon the 4th jhana. They develop this passion towards perception. This is called sanya viraga. And then if they develop that strongly enough, that will sort of affect their 4th jhanic consciousness, so that the 4th jhana citta will lead them to rebirth in the plane of non-percipient beings. And when they take rebirth there, then mind and consciousness and perception, all mental functions stop completely, temporarily, during their stay in that realm. And so they exist there just as a body with material form, perhaps a lump of a material substance of some sort, but without any mental functions at all. Okay, then the 3rd major division in the fine material realm is the division of the pure abodes, which is, as I said, reserved. Entry is reserved for non-returners. So only the non-returners, the anagamis, can be reborn in the pure abodes. And then if we turn to page 218, there's some explanation of what determines which particular abode in the pure abodes the non-returners take rebirth into. So this is the paragraph that begins, "But non-returners are reborn in the pure abodes. Okay, so here it is said that their rebirth into these 5 realms is determined by their predominant spiritual faculty. Non-returners in whom faith is the dominant faculty are reborn into the Aviha realm. The Aviha realm, let's see how that was translated. It's translated here as the durable realm. Durable, long-lasting. Yeah. You find it on page 192 under section number 6. Okay, those in whom energy is the dominant faculty are reborn into the Atapa realm. The Atapa realm, here it's translated the serene realm. Then those in whom mindfulness is dominant go into the Sudasa realm. That's the beautiful realm. Those in whom concentration is dominant are reborn in the Sudasi realm. That's the clear-sighted realm. And those for whom wisdom is dominant are reborn into the Akanita realm. That is the highest of the 5 pure abodes. And then this is an interesting point, what comes next, and clears up a common misunderstanding. Sometimes we think that non-returners are always reborn in the pure abodes. But I found in some commentary that it said that although none but non-returners are reborn into the pure abodes, there is no fixed law holding that all non-returners are reborn there. What is said in the suttas is that the non-returners do not return to this world, but they achieve final nirvana elsewhere. That means in a higher realm of existence. But it's not it's not necessarily the case that non-returners are reborn in the pure abodes. They could be reborn elsewhere in the fine material realm. If they have the immaterial jhanas, perhaps they are reborn in the immaterial realm, and then they achieve final nirvana there. So then I speculated, I think this was sort of my own conjecture, that it may be that the pure abodes are open or available only to non-returners who possess the 5th jhana, while non-returners with a lower jhanic attainment will be reborn elsewhere in the fine material plane. However, all non-returners must be reborn, I would now say at least in the fine material plane, because possibly they could be reborn in the immaterial plane. But they have eradicated sensual desire, which is the fetter that binds living beings to the sense sphere plane. Do you know, Venerable Dhammadeva, do you know if the Abhidhamma kosha system, what they say about the non-returners, their plane of rebirth? You don't remember? Okay, so this takes care of the rebirth in the these are the results of the fine material sphere wholesome karma. And note that the fine material sphere wholesome karma, its results are always the citta that performs the 3 functions of rebirth linking, bhavanga, and the death consciousness. We don't have any other results of the fine material sphere chittas. Of course, when we're practicing meditation, say aiming to reach the jhana, before we reach the jhana, we'll be generating a lot of wholesome sense sphere chittas with 3 roots. And so these wholesome sense sphere chittas with 3 roots will build up the karmic potential to become causes for rebirth into the sense sphere realm with 3 roots. And then if we achieve the jhana, then that wholesome karma could still mature in the fine material realm in other ways by producing further good desirable results in the fine material sphere. But those results would be the ripening of the sense sphere wholesome chittas. When the fine material sphere citta brings its own result, that result is simply the rebirth, bhavanga, death consciousness. Then we come to the results of the immaterial sphere, wholesome karma. And so the text says, developing wholesome karma of the immaterial sphere, beings are reborn in the immaterial planes corresponding to their attainments. And so the guide says that one who has developed the base of infinite space and at the time of death hasn't lost it because of negligence or other hindrances will be reborn into the realm of infinite space. And similarly, with respect to the other immaterial attainments. And if a person has several immaterial attainments, it's said that the highest attainment, which is still preserved at the time of death, will become the cause for rebirth into the corresponding realm. And the formless or immaterial meditative attainment produces its rebirth, its resultant citta, only with having the functions of rebirth linking, bhavanga, and the death consciousness. Okay, so this takes care of the results of karma. If anybody has any questions at this point, we'll take them. Let me just get up so I could see more clearly. Okay, Mr. Raju. And please take the wireless microphone.
Thank you, Bhante. When in the 5th jhana, when the person decides that all the suffering is in consciousness only, and so he gets aversion to it, so he becomes non-percipient. Percipient. So he's still, there is jiva is going on. He's a living being still. As far as the Rupa has a living aspect to it. So he is a being. It's not just a matter. So
right.
Some people say this matter has a life in it. And in fact, I'm making it a papancha now. All the matter, maybe those beings who just rejected the consciousness became the matter, and Rupa is created that way?
No. These are beings existing in a particular plane of their own, and their material bodies, as you mentioned, it has the jivit indriya, it has the life faculty. So they're living by.
Not this matter, the different matter.
It's not the matter of not the matter like the table or the chairs.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, Ed.
Yes, I have to be careful, Bhante. Okay?
Excuse me?
I'm taking that you can hear me and I'm okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. I'm going to have to worry a little bit about my terms here. I went to look back to see that I could find them, but I mentioned the other day this pre-death state of neither perception nor feeling that is mentioned in the Sutana.
Yeah.
Is this state of non-percipient beings, I think we alluded to it the other day as well, and I think maybe you mentioned that if they came out of that state, because they had not necessarily received final liberation, that they became reunited with the consciousness. Is that the same state that we're talking about here in the, let's call it subsequent life state? Is that comparable to the neither perception or feeling state that people have during life?
I see, the cessation of perception and feeling state.
Right. I mean, the others seem to correlate with jhanic attainments.
Yeah. Yeah, the cessation of perception and feeling is supposed to be like a very high meditative attainment, which can be attained only, they say, by non-returners and by arahants. And so it's a temporary meditative state in which, when one enters, then perception and feeling stop temporarily. But then one comes out of that meditative state, and then, of course, all of the mental functions resume. And that is considered, a very lofty, very exalted meditative state. Whereas the type of the realm of existence of the non-percipient beings from the Buddha standpoint is considered undesirable because there's no possibility of any further spiritual progress there. So it's almost like a dead end while one is there. And to resume one's progress, one has to come out of that realm and back into either the human realm or one of the celestial realms. Is that okay? Okay. Let's see, Jean and Ming.
I was just more or less curious that what happens at the end of their span in fine material realms. Like if they're reborn, how many roots do they have? What kind? What do they come in with? What is their rebirth?
I know there is a section that deals with this. There is a section that deals with this that we will be taking up. So when we get to that section, I think your question will be answered. Okay, Ming, and then...
Thank you, Bande. If you mentioned that if we cultivate morat and then at the end we can get three root next life. Okay, and if somebody has the three root for this life, and it's also possible they lose it and become two roots next life, is that true?
It's possible. If one has three roots in this life and one doesn't generate enough wholesome karma, then one could be reborn the next life with two roots. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Bhante. I think discussion on this point gave me this understanding, and I want you to correct it. The fifth jhana is an excellent level of jhana, and the non-percipient being, he goes there because of the view, which is not the right view, saying that this consciousness is the problem.
Yeah.
So that's why he went there.
I think, that's a good way to put it, yeah.
Could be that is the last stop of wrong view. I mean, that's the last stage where I could still fall back.
Yeah.
And if I don't have the wrong view, then you'll become an arhat.
Yeah, it's a kind of wrong view. It seems it could have been held by some of the other spiritual groups in India during the Buddha's time. And so maybe this was the kind of view that was held by those who were practicing the extreme austerities, self-mortification.
Okay. I thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, if no further questions, then why don't we take a break now? And now it's 5 to 10. So what we're going to do before you go out, we should do 5 minutes of bodily movement. Maybe Donna, do you want to lead us in this exercise?